Watchmaking is one of those crafts that is oftentimes passed from one watchmaker to the next. A library full of watchmaking books allows you to try to figure it out on your own. You have some access to the things that another watchmaker or specialist in a watchmaking related field deemed so important that they should write a book about it. Over the years, I've collected quite a few books. I look at them as kind of irreplaceable. In the watchmaking world, there are some books that go out of print, and they might not be printed again for 10 years, 20 years, or maybe they'll never be printed again. So they're almost like treasured items for someone like myself. Here in front of me are some of my most valued books that I think would be a good starting place for somebody who's trying to learn about watchmaking, watch design, engineering, repair, all of those things through books. So a great starting point for watchmaking or watch repair, kind of understanding the basics and the practical side of watchmaking, is this book, Practical Watch Repairing. This goes through everything that a typical watchmaker would be dealing with if you're thinking about repairing old watches. All the basics, including disassembly, assembly, making some tools, how to use a lathe, how to diagnose problems, all the introduction to watch repairing. The same author, Complicated Watches and Their Repair. This goes beyond the simple watch repair and gets into things like minute repeaters and perpetual calendars. It amazes me every time I look through this book that somebody actually wrote a book about how to repair a minute repeater, because they are so rare. I likely will never have an actual minute repeater. But if I did find one, I would be able to take it apart, possibly repair it, and put it back together. And to me, it's spectacular that somebody actually wrote a book about that. George Daniel's Watchmaking. Now, I've ended up with a few copies of this book. It was a very hard book to get because it had been out of print for a long time. So I remember the first copy I got because it took a lot of work to find one that I could afford. Now, in George Daniel's Watchmaking, he walks through subjects like setting up a workshop, setting up lathes, how to lay out a watch movement, some wheel cutting and pinion cutting and hardening, tempering, all of these things for hand making a watch. Dial making, making hands of the watch. However, there are areas that he does not cover. So George Daniel's Watchmaking is a great book to generally look at for certain tasks relating to handmade watches. But it certainly doesn't contain everything you need to know to make a complete watch start to finish. Wheel and pinion cutting in horology, which goes into great detail about setting up different types of lathes and different pinion and wheel cutting machines in order to cut clock and watch wheels and pinions. I also have another book here about cutting wheels, and it is not a watch specific book, but it is very valuable because it shows you in more detail how gears are made in general instead of just focusing on the clock and watch world. So this has some different types of gears that we don't necessarily see inside of a watch, but you may want to adapt it to something specialized in the watch world. This book also focuses a bit on gear geometry, which is something that is quite advanced, and knowing how to design a gear train and make a gear train for a watch is quite complex because there are many different tooth profiles involved, And it's not as simple as just having wheels and pinions. Now, if you really want to get into the technical nitty-gritty relating to watch design and engineering, then there are some even more advanced books that go into that side of watchmaking. Here in the US, when we talk about watchmaking, and even in Switzerland, watchmaking is typically going to involve watch assembly, repair, and restoration, but not necessarily the design of a new watch or watch movement would be included in that. So this book goes beyond watchmaking and into watch engineering and design. For a few years, I only had this book in German, and so it was quite a challenge going through it and learning not only how to translate into English, but with a lot of the complex technical words, it's even trickier to translate. But I was fortunate enough to get this watch technology book in English now. So, a much better option for myself who does not speak German. Then we have what is actually a watch movement design textbook. These are very hard to find because there's only one school I know of that actually teaches from this textbook, and that is in Switzerland. I don't believe it's made in English, so I have the French version here, and this is basically watchmaking construction. And this goes through all of the theory, all of the very technical parts of designing, engineering, manufacturing a mechanical wristwatch. And in these two technical books, it even goes into other types of watches, not necessarily just your standard mechanical watch. Now, I don't make anything that is a quartz watch or a battery-powered watch, but these are modern-day textbooks, so they'll cover everything that is modern watchmaking. This next book is actually just one book out of a batch of documents that are the watchmaking norms. So if you are a watch manufacturer, you actually follow the norms. These are instructions on how to do your documentation, what the standard gear profiles are, what the standard screw sizes are. If you're doing any kind of engineering or design work, this is necessary if you want to fit into the industry and follow those norms so that you can work with other watchmakers and other watch part manufacturers. Because with the norms, you're speaking the same language, even if we are speaking English and the manufacturer is speaking French. At least our documentation is on the same page. The one book that I think is the most valuable when it comes to watchmaking decoration is High-End Horological Finishing. It was put out by Audemars Piguet, and one of the reasons I really like this book is that they show all of the decoration techniques in two different ways. They show you how something is achieved for hand-finished parts, and then they also show you how a similar, maybe possibly considered a less than type finishing would be achieved in a larger batch or in big production. So as an example, you could have a flat or black polished screw head. That's impossible to achieve in any kind of bulk finishing realm. So in this book, you could learn how to achieve that black polish on a handmade watch, but they'll also show you the different levels of other finishing techniques where a screw head is bulk polished with a vibratory polishing machine. And that screw will cost a lot less money to produce than a black polished screw that is black polished by hand. So this book showing multiple different ways for different price points and finish levels, I think is really interesting. And a company like Audemars Piguet does both. They have $1 million watches that are finished by hand, but they also have watches that are $15,000, which will have a lot more bulk finishing methods used. Again, this book was very hard to find in English, so I'm very, very proud to have one in English. But it took some searching. This is the equivalent of hundreds of watchmakers' knowledge. It just requires one person who's interested in learning and putting this knowledge to practice. It's out there. You just have to be the person to find it and put it to use. For me, a library like this is irreplaceable. It is so important to have this knowledge written down, because otherwise, if it's just in a watchmaker's head, when that watchmaker retires or passes away, that knowledge is gone forever. So knowing that there are watchmakers out there that have put this into text and lots of photography and artwork to go along with it is pretty amazing.